I'm about to hit y'all with a concept y'all probably never heard of, or at least I've never heard anybody else talk about. This is just something I understand, right? Something I've observed, something I've experienced, and something that I've done in my own time and with my own mindset to make sure that I wouldn't end up going through certain things, right? Now, this is what it is, right? I call this concept manna from heaven. Manna from heaven, right? Each day you get your daily bread. Understand this, right? This is what you need to understand, that for most men, sexual access to a woman, being dominant with the woman, is something that gives them a certain level of validation. When you're dominant, you're the primary giver of pleasure, and you're the secondary receiver of pleasure. But you're also the primary receiver of control and the secondary giver of control. You're not getting as much pleasure out of being dominant as a woman would out of being submissive, or as you would be out of being submissive. It's not going to be the same level of physical pleasure or the same level of excitement, but you'll get your intensity through the ego gratification of being in control. So when a woman is pursuing you, and a woman is giving you energy, and a woman is treating you well, she's being very sexually active with you, there's something that's going to pour into your cup. It's going to put a battery into your back. But something that can happen along that way is this right here. Right? Something that will happen along the way is that if you're continuing to do this all the time with women who you're not attracted enough to be in a relationship with, or you're having to just be emotionally unavailable and not just show emotional discipline and set your standards about how you're going to move forward, then what's going to happen is eventually you are going to have too much validation in your cup. Your cup is going to be overrun. And once your cup gets overrun as a man, you're going to start losing interest in sex, right? You're going to start feeling empty from all those women that you sleep with. Tell you some real shit. This is why I talk about sexual integration. Like, it's not enough just to be masculine and dominant and fuck all these women out here. That's not going to be fulfilling over a period of time unless you have certain tools in your tool belt, certain skills in your tool belt, right? Certain things in your skill set. So this concept is called manna from heaven. If you are a man who's running a rotation, right? You're staying emotionally detached from those women. You're not prematurely integrating with those women. Then you're going to get a lot of an influx of what's being poured into you. But understand that for a woman, like in the words of Rom Wills, a man makes love to a woman's body while a woman makes love to a man's mind. So if you're emotionally and mentally detached from a woman to where that doesn't affect you, something that can happen is this. You're going to be taking up and soaking up and soaking up and soaking up validation without pouring any out. And that influx of validation is being poured into you. If you're not pouring it back out in a way that's adequate for you, using sexual transmutation, right? Or if you're not reciprocating the energy that's being poured into you, you'll eventually be in a place where you're going to start to go through character erosion, and you're going to start going through erosion yourself. You're going to lose your desire. So, like I say, it works like this. It doesn't mean that you're taking advantage of a woman necessarily, right? It doesn't mean that, because you're making love to her body. That's what makes her submissive, right? That's what makes her, feel that feminine way with you, is when, sex to her is at least an equivalent exchange or something that she's getting more out of. So you don't have to do those extra things to avoid taking advantage of her. It's just a matter of when you're in that particular type of scenario, you still have to think about the validation that's coming in and where you're pouring it back out. So that means that you need to either have some platonic female friends. Listen, I'm about to tell you some real shit. Either you need to have some platonic female friends who you go do nice shit with, or you talk on the phone to, or who you pour some validation and emotional energy back out to, or every once in a while, you need to, just pick a woman, right? Just pick a woman and spend that night romancing her. Spend that night, massage her. You know what I mean? Get the oils out. Coconut, that coconut oil, some damn grapeseed oil. You take your time, you romance her, right? You play that nice music, you light some candles, and you treat her well. You romance her. You give her some validation. Because you have to pour some of that shit out. You have to let that steam off. You do. Because that shit will implode, right? That shit will implode. Have you ever seen a dude who's doing nothing but fucking women all the time for forever, that nigga starts to look soulless after a while. That nigga starts to look like he ain't got no life in his eyes, right? Just cold. And have you ever seen a woman who is a full-time attention whore, who's celibate at the same time? Eventually, she's going to get tired of attention and she just going to start deleting her Facebook accounts and her social media. I've seen it happen plenty of times. Some women that I fuck with, that's something that'll happen. Like sage burners tend to do that. Sage burners tend to do that. Sometimes Topangas do that. It's like a woman will put herself out there to get a certain type of attention. After she gets so much of it without having a place to pour that back out to, some dominant energy, then she's going to be in a place where she is going to start to go through sexual implosion. Right? Or sexual polarity implosion. That might be the word I'm going to use for it. But what happens is she's going to start looking old in the face. She's going to start to look bottled up. She's going to start to look a particular way to where even if she's attracted, her energy is just not going to look right. Something's going to seem off about her. Right? And usually when people get to that place, that's where they get stuck on that mindset of being toxic, right? Where they get stuck in that place, in that mindset of just devaluing the other sex, the other gender, just devaluing them because they just use them and they're not pouring anything back out. So as a man, there's times where you're gonna have to do that, because what happened with manna from the heaven in the Bible, right? Manna for heaven. You got your daily bread, but on the Sabbath, right? On the Sabbath, what would happen? The day before, you would get a double portion of the manna from heaven, and then you weren't supposed to work the next day. But if you got more than you were supposed to get for that next day, and you tried to save that manna that you got, it would spoil. That validation that you're soaking up will spoil if you never pour it out. Life is supposed to work on ebbs and flows. Life is supposed to work on a reciprocation of energy. Life is supposed to work like a volley, right? Life is supposed to work like a ball going over a net, right? It's the cycle of life, right? It's not take. You take and you give, right? And if you never give, it's going to fuck you up. All that validation that you're soaking up is going to spoil within you. So this is just a concept to understand. And this is another thing that I tell for women who are just out there running their game, trying to be dominant women. Because just like I said, I got from Rom Wills, a man makes love to a woman's body and a woman makes love to a man's mind. If a woman has emotional access to a man for a considerable period of time without being sexually submissive with him, then eventually she's going to lose interest in even that emotional validation that she's getting. And then she's going to lose interest in both, right? And then she's going to just shut down completely because she's getting too much validation without being in a place where she feels safe enough to pour it back out. And a lot of that is going to be her own fault. Sometimes it's the man she's dealing with. You know, a lot of this comes from not being fully in your polarity. Understand what I'm saying? So as a pleasure seeker, that can happen. As a man, you should have the leadership skills, the game, and the program to where if you're dealing with enough women, eventually some of those women should be getting on your program well enough so that you're getting a consistent reciprocation of your energy, so that you're getting a consistent amount of sex with that woman. She desires you. She respects you. She's receptive to your guidance. You give her leadership. You give her validation. And she needs to be performing well enough with you to where you can give her validation for things that she actually does right. You reward her. You give her some time, some attention, some energy, some affection. It's just a matter of when you've done that before with a woman who wasn't on your program, then you'll think that you aren't supposed to give women validation. You'll think that you aren't supposed to make women feel good, right? You'll think that. And when you have that particular mindset, what you don't understand is cup theory. How cup theory works is like this. If you give a woman validation and you pour into her cup when her cup is too low, then she will see you as a beta male, right? Now, you can be a feminine dominant and pretend to be a beta male, giving her all that validation, right? But that situation is going to turn bad. It's going to flip on you. She's going to grow entitled to it. And then she is going to continue to get eroded. She's going to continue to go through that loss of her feminine energy, that loss of what's in her cup, right? It's going to continue to get lower until she's either going to go celibate, go fuck with women, or go fuck with a real beta male, with a feminine submissive man. That's just how it works. Now, the thing to understand about cup theory is this. Even if you're a masculine dominant man, you might take pity on a woman because of what situation she's in and try to be caring and loving and understanding. But what can happen in this particular situation can be like Devin Franklin and Megan Good, right? You're pouring into your cup. You might be dominant in your lifestyle. You might feel like you're masculine. That's just your masculine point of view is just to be emotional with women. You're prematurely integrated, right? It's not about you being integrated as a man necessarily. It's about you being able to be masculine and dominant long enough for a woman to be feminine and submissive with you, and then to integrate that feminine energy and that submissive energy into the relationship in a way to where it's fetishized and it's respected. Like a man who is in the military, if he's in the war and he comes back, his homeboys, his comrades died in the war and he survived and he's getting a Medal of Honor and he cries at his ceremony, nobody's gonna think he's a bitch, right? You have to understand that there's a time and a place to show your emotions as a man. And if you don't understand that, then you're going to bottle that shit up until you're going to implode. That's toxic masculinity, right? You know, people say that toxic masculinity doesn't exist. It does, right? It's just that a lot of things that are true masculinity are put into the box of toxic masculinity. But I say this, fuck it. Toxic masculinity, I'll be toxic. Toxic is a spectrum. Moral, amoral, immoral, right? Moral, amoral, immoral. There's a spectrum of toxicity. It's not all the same. Certain things are necessary this day and age in the landscape because the social programming is so strong that you're going to have to disrespect a woman's boundaries in order to get behind her social mask. Right? Not necessarily her boundaries, but you're going to have to assume that her boundaries aren't where she's going to convey that they're at so that you can see if that's really what she's on. Don't go too far with it, but that's what you got to do in this day and age, unless you just got a bunch of women who are approaching you. And then a lot of those women are going to be dominant themselves. And a lot of them are going to be no limit soldier, those women who are going to approach you first. Especially if they're highly, highly attracted to you. That's how a lot of them are going to move. Or they're going to see you as relationship material and want to be prematurely integrated with you. Like for some women, like they got a gentleman gigolo complex. Either they want you to immediately be their boyfriend or to never be anything but a fuck buddy. Understand that. So you got to deal with women who are feminine, submissive with you in your program. If you run your program right, you make sure that you're desirable. You make sure that you're running your game right. You got emotional discipline. You got some good dick and some guidance. You set expectations. Then eventually, what you got to understand is this. A woman has to pour out enough of her cup to feel that you are not easy, right? And if she doesn't feel that you're easy, watch my video about what it means to be easy. Then when you pour back into her cup, and it's not about being easy, it's about you setting your standards. So you say, okay, cool. You have standards in your mind before you even meet the woman of what it will take for you to reciprocate on an emotional level. When you set those standards, you vet the woman, you see for consistency, you see if she can follow instructions, you see if she can get on your programs, you see if she sexually desires you, you see if that sexual relationship meets up to your standards of what you consider compatible. And after those things are met, and you make sure that that process is enjoyable enough for her so that it stays in an intrinsic place and not a transactional place, which is masculine submissive, which will limit her ability to be submissive with you, because femininity is what lubricates submissiveness. So after you understand that aspect of it, when a woman reaches a certain point where you set her expectations and she's reached that point, especially from an intrinsic place, and it's been on a consistent level, you have to know how to integrate. And how you integrate, you have to sexualize those things that are feminine or submissive from you, because you're still a person who's a full being. You're still a person who has feminine energy. You're still a person who has emotions. You're still a person who likes pleasure, right? So that means you got to teach a woman certain shit. Teach her how to give you a high level of pleasure. Teach her how to ride your dick real good, suck your dick real good, do things that put her in a position of control. Teach her something to where she has an opportunity to be logical and make certain decisions, right? So that she's not just a puppy who's just, walking around like a dog all day, right? She got to be your bitch first. See, people ain't gonna like me saying that, but no, true, she do. But at the same time, after she reaches that point to where she receives that, she's open to that, then you teach her something. After you teach her something, then you give her an opportunity to do those things on her own. You start integrating, right? You start to sexualize and fetishize the times of you showing your emotions. You mix sex with emotions. That's making love. See, there's a difference between making love with a woman, right, that's integrated, that has a 9 level of sexual attraction to you, who respects and desires you as a man, to where that slow sex, that passionate sex, that emotion involved is something that just increases her desire and her respect for you, to where she's in love with you. There's a difference between that and trying to be soft and gentle with the woman because she can't handle you being rough, or because she's not receptive to your dominance, and that's basically you just trying to trade femininity in order to get sex out of it. Or trying to trade femininity in order to get cooperation because she's not feminine and lubricated enough for you to actually be dominant with her. You have to put your dominance first. And if you don't, you may never get to be able to be dominant with that woman, right? Not unless you does something bad enough to where she feels like, you get on her case after she really fucks up, and then she's going to be able to get in her feminine energy for a short period of time because she knows she's wrong. Then she'll be more submissive with you. But that's going to be something that's going to flip back around. You got to lead from the front, right? So when you understand this concept, you got to know that as a human being, yes, we're meant to be masculine and dominant, or feminine submissive. That's the aligned position. That's what's aligned, because that's polarity. But polarity is not the end goal. Polarity is not the end goal. The end goal is integration, right? So it's like red pill. Like red pill is you're starting to learn polarity, right? But after you learn polarity, there's more levels to polarity than just that, right? There's more levels to polarity than just the red pill. You go beyond that, you get in the game, right? When you get in the game, that's where the red pill is kind of just like masculine and feminine, or good and bad, or whatever it is, right? But then when you get into game, that's when it's masculine and dominant, feminine and submissive. But once you get into integration, that's where you become a whole person based off of that particular situation. And then both of you are being fulfilled in that relationship to where it's integrated. It's just that people put the cart before the horse, right? That's exactly what it's like. People put the cart before the horse. They get prematurely integrated, and then they go through sexual polarity erosion because they never fully established their sexual polarity in the first place in a way that's sustainable. Right? Because a lot of people, they want to be on some player shit for life. To me, that's like Peter Pan word. To me, that's childish. To me, that's not man shit. To be a pleasure seeker, it's not. But for a period of time, sometimes that's necessary so that you can actually find a woman who you have sexual polarity with, so that you can get to the place where you can eventually be in a relationship, have a marriage, have a family, have a sustainable nuclear home type of situation, so that you can raise your children in a good, healthy environment. Get what I'm saying? Like, the goal is marriage eventually, but you got to have a plan to get there, not just sit around thinking, oh, well, I don't really care about marriage and I don't really care about a relationship. Man should never want a relationship. That's bullshit. It's true up front. If somebody ain't got no game, you got to strip away that idea of desiring a relationship from them for the period of time. But after you reach a certain level, there's something you go beyond. Sometimes what men do, and we mess up like this, right? We mess up like this. I know it is, right? Sometimes when we're explaining things, we don't properly set expectations because we're doing things one thing at a time. And there's a reason why. Sometimes the reason why is because when somebody's feminine submissive, they're going to get with your program as is, and they're not looking too far into the future. But sometimes you have to set expectations, because when somebody's going through psychological reactance, because they're going through cognitive dissonance about the things that you're saying versus what they're doing, sometimes people put somebody into a position where they don't tell them what's going to come later if they do what they say, right? And they may not understand it, which causes them to take shortcuts, which will cause them to try to do it without understanding where it's coming from. And then it'll put them into a situation to where they're going to have to go through a whole bunch of bullshit before they get to the place where they understand what they're talking about. A great example of that was just my video of Samurai X Trust and Betrayal, A Tale of Psychological Reactance. In that video, talking about Seijiro Hiko, he told him a little bit, but he didn't really explain exactly what would go down. If he really had that conversation with Kenshin Moore, it might have worked a little bit better. But his ego got a little bit hurt because Kenshin wasn't fully listening to him. So he shut the whole thing down. And sometimes it's necessary, right? He had a little bit of a conversation with him. But in life, it can work that way. That's like if somebody tells you to do something, you don't completely understand why. You got other shit that you want to do. And then they tell you what to do. You don't fully listen. And then they get upset when they had something planned that they didn't even tell you about. And then now it's sabotaged because you didn't blindly listen and follow to what they had to say. Yes, sometimes you're going to be feminine and submissive, but if you're attached to somebody already, something that occurs, that thing can go bad. And how that relates to what I'm talking about is with the dating coaches sometimes. Sometimes dating coaches will leave somebody in a nearsighted perspective to not understand what the end goal is. Telling them that certain things just aren't even part of the end goal. There's just certain steps you have to go through to be sexually integrated. So I'm just letting guys know this right here. Don't feel bad if you get to a place where you want to give a woman some attention, some validation. Know where to pour that into. It's either a woman who deserves it or a woman who you're not having sex with who adds value to your life. Give some time, some attention, and energy there. And when you do those particular things, it'll help you, right? I've been fucking around for a while now, right? And I've taken my little breaks here and there, right? And sometimes it's necessary. And I've taken my breaks to just deal with one woman to be exclusive for certain periods of time. I've also taken time to, just making sure I limit like the size of my rotations. But another thing that I do is this right here is just sometimes, this is what I was about to say. I've never felt like I just felt so drained and depleted and soulless and empty because of having sex with multiple women. I haven't been at that place because I already understood this concept, because I've seen it go down with women who will be both attention whores and celibate, right? If you're celibate, you don't need to be an attention whore because you're going to soak up so much validation without pouring back out sexually that it's going to implode. All that validation that you're soaking in is going to rot inside of you. It's going to spoil, right? So I'm going to call this video Manna from Heaven, Spoiled Validation. Brody, I'm out.